you might want to get down to the core of what's ethical. How do you know that two people, that could be you and your customer, are engaged in an ethical enterprise? And the answer is, you both do it voluntarily, so there's no compulsion and force, but you do it in a manner that you both want to repeat. Like, that's actually the definition of ethical. And look, imagine you have a relationship with your wife or your husband, hopefully that's the case. It isn't just that you have a relationship, you have a repeating sequence of micro relationships, right? An indefinitely repeating sequence of micro relationships. And insofar as each of those micro relationships is going well, you want to repeat them. And it's the fact that you're both voluntarily on board with that over the long run that indicates that it's an ethical enterprise. And you know well, as small business owners, or maybe some of you are larger business owners, that you mistreat even one of your customers at your peril. Because if you mistreat someone, not only will they remember that, and they will never forget it. And we have a specialized module as human beings, by the way, to remember cheaters. So you might forget people you cooperate with, but you do not forget people that ripped you off. And not only that, you will tell everybody you know about it. If you mistreat a handful of your customers, I don't know how many, if you mistreat 100 customers, your business will fail. Because they'll tell 100 people, and that's 10,000, and that's probably enough to sink you. And so if you've been treating your customers well enough so that they've established long-term reciprocal relationships with you, same applies to your suppliers, then by definition, you're engaging in an ethical enterprise. You know, and you might say, well, it could be better. It's like, well, good, make it better. But it's already ethical if it's sustainable. You know, I hate that word, but you know what I mean. If it's voluntarily sustainable, it's ethical. And one of the wonderful things about a free market society, it is a society of voluntary exchange. That's what makes it ethical. Nobody has to be your customer. And certainly no one has to be your repeat customer or your supplier. And what that means is that you have to conduct yourself in a manner that's commensurate with mutual gain, right? And maybe mutual expanding gain in order for the whole game to continue. And that's what you want in your marriage, is you want repeated interactions in a manner that produces mutual expansion, so that you want to keep playing with your partner, let's say, but you want to do it in a way that makes the whole game better as you progress. You do exactly the same thing on the business front. And this isn't some hand-waving, moralistic whitewashing. It's like, no, companies that don't do that, companies that rip off their customers, fail. Companies that even mildly mistreat their customers fail. Now, that isn't true if there's an artificial monopoly, let's say, but then you're not in the domain of voluntary exchange. So as long as the system is set up so that your customer has a choice, and so does your suppliers, you have to conduct yourself in an ethical manner to succeed. And conservative types have done a very bad job of making that case, to the leftists in particular. It's like, no, you don't understand. If we weren't ethical, given the rules of voluntary exchange, we would fail. So you come after us and you say, well, just because you've made a profit, so you're an exploiter. It's like, no, you have failed to make a profit because you're a loser, and now you're resentful about it, and you're coming after me, right? And it's a bit more complicated, because a lot of the people who criticize you, they've gone off to university and they've been supplied by resentful and bitter losers, I would say, on the intellectual front, with an array of sophisticated arguments about why you're an exploitive capitalist. And they're quite articulated about that, and they're good at exploiting guilt. And another problem is that competent people who are conscientious, and that's a very good predictor of business success, especially on the managerial front, conscientious people are guilt-prone. And because conscientious people will be scouring their conscience all the time for things they've done wrong. And that's a good thing if you're going to run a business, because you should pay attention to the details. But what it does is it opens you up on the attack front, because if a radical comes after you and says, you could be a little less sexist than you are, and you could be a little less racist than you are, and maybe there's something about your profitable activity that's exploitive, if you're conscientious, you're going to feel guilty right away and say, well, I probably could be better than I am, which is true. But that doesn't mean that you give the moral upper hand to your accuser. It's like, well, who the hell are you to come after me? What have you done with your life? Do you have a family? Have you produced anything of value? Or you like an 18-year-old pup who is wet behind the ears, who's not maintained themselves at all, and think because you've been educated by idiots that you now have the moral upper hand. So, yeah.